This episode of Trifles is brought to you by listeners like you, who support us on Patreon and Substack. To learn more, go to patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com. Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the circle was red, the study was scarlet, and the Scot was glorious, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder about the giant rat of Sumatra, the remarkable worm unknown to science, or the repulsive story of the red leech?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 430, North American Businesses. Hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we get into the details of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, I don't know if we should be singing the Star-Spangled Banner or O Canada or singing one and booing the other. Who knows these days? But
who knows?
We find ourselves firmly planted in North America, which is usually where we are.
Yes, it does seem that way.
Yeah. Well, we're ivy planted here in North America. We have a lovely show ahead for you. We are engaging in part 2. You may remember that a couple of episodes ago we discussed British businesses. Well, now we're going across the Atlantic and looking at some of the North American businesses that were mentioned. We had a little bit of a spoiler last time with Myers Toronto, but there are so many others to choose from. We will do our best to make it interesting. Meanwhile, don't forget, you can subscribe to our show on whatever podcast platform you happen to listen to us on, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and via email. We'll send you email updates directly from our website, which is SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. You can always find the show notes there, as well as whatever apps you happen to use. And you can sign up for bonus content from Patreon and Substack. Again, pick the platform that works for you. We will send you additional content, outtakes, trifling trifles, shorter episodes that have to do with things that interest us, as well as to give you the opportunity to participate in those communities. Have a rousing discussion with each other about trifling matters. So check those all out. Well, Bert, I like to live in America. Lots of businesses in America. Yeah.
Chromium steel in America.
Yeah. There you go. So we find ourselves crossing the pond and looking at businesses over on this side of the Atlantic this time around. There were quite a few to choose from in the UK, but where do you want to start in North America?
Oh, well, it's interesting that I find that the names of the firms in North America in the canon are generally less interesting. Well, there's certainly fewer of them, as you point out, but I find them generally less interesting for some reason. Although there are some peculiar ones, and there's a peculiar one I wanted to start with,
please,
which is Max Linder and Company. I think it's almost impossible. I'll say it's a very interesting name for a variety of reasons. But I'll say it's impossible from the structure of the name to figure out what the enterprise does.
Max Linder.
North American company.
My instinct is to say chocolatier.
Oh, that's very good. That's a good guess.
But that's
Linder,
Lindt.
yeah, that does sound like a
Oh.
chocolatier. No, Max Linder is referred to in the Valley of Fear, and of all things, it's supposed to be a coal company.
Oh.
But it's a name that if you were reading the cases of Sherlock Holmes and reading the Valley of Fear, particularly, I think, in Europe or in England or in Britain, you might well know the name Max Linder and wonder why it's on the page, because Max Linder was a fairly popular comedian. He was a French actor and a director and a screenwriter
Ah,
of the silent film.
that's amazing.
And in fact, our friend, and he was a comedian, and he acted in the theater. And I think I've seen some of his work in the few old films, I think, that still exist. But our friend Russell Merritt was our late friend and much missed Russell Merritt, was very fond of Max Linder and Company. And in fact, he adopted that for his nom de plume in the Five Orange Pips.
Oh, that's fantastic. Max Linder.
Max
well,
Linder.
if I'm getting my fill of Linder, I want Maximum Linder.
Maximum Linder, yeah.
Now, of course, this is also a geographical name. The Linder is a river in Bavaria, which makes sense in terms of it being used as a business name in coal country, because there were a lot of Germans who came over to Pennsylvania and settled there. So some consistency there. But I do like the idea of the silent film comedian being used. Max Linder. Yeah, similarly in that category, if we're looking at coal companies in the Valley of Fear, we also have Walker Brothers, West Gilmerton General Mining Company, and Ray and Sturmash.
Now that is a name you would think would be involved in brewing, wouldn't you? Sturmash.
Sturmash.
Brewing. Yeah.
Yeah. Sturm and Drang. Thunderous beer. Yeah, so of course, in creating a realistic scenery, background story in the Valley of Fear, Conan Doyle had to come up with all of these various coal companies.
Yeah, I guess so. But there are again, some sort of peculiar names here. For example, Shafters.
Yes.
So if I told you we were going to Shafters, what would you think would happen?
Oh, that's
that's
the elevator company.
Right. Right.
Elevator. We got the shaft. Right.
That's right. But back in Valley of Fear, and I must say that Valley of Fear as a story is responsible probably for 80% of the North American names of businesses. But Shafters apparently is the name of a boarding house.
Yes.
That pops up somewhere in Valley of Fear.
Eddie Shafter was Douglas's. What was it? Eddie Shafter? Yeah, I believe that was her name. Was his intended?
Etty?
Yeah.
Oh, and that's where that's her parent.
Her maiden name. Yeah. So, yeah, Eddie Shafter she's Shafter's daughter. My mother's dead. I run the house. You can sit down by the stove in the front room until father comes along. So there you go. Not Shafter and Sons, but just Shafters, because there were no sons. Well, of course, ripped from the headlines in the Valley of Fear, because realism counts for something. We have Smith & Wesson. We know what Smith & Wesson makes.
Yes, yeah, they make guns.
Yes.
Things like that.
Similarly.
Just like in Valley of Fear, the Pennsylvania Small Arms Company.
Yes.
Which was an associated company to the Maryland Small Legs Company that was founded around the same time.
That
in
is
Baltimore.
Funny.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, on the discussion forum, The Firing Line, which is the leading online forum for firearms enthusiasts, evidently. Someone asked the question. Holmes finds a sawed-off shotgun, identifies it as being made by the Pennsylvania Small Arms Company. I'm working on a presentation on guns in the Sherlock Holmes stories and would like to know whether this was a real company.
Oh, sure.
And it does not exist.
Oh, there wasn't really a Pennsylvania
No.
small... Well, there were small arms companies.
Yeah. So so again, you've got the very real Smith & Wesson paired with a fictional Pennsylvania Small Arms Company.
Yeah, that is interesting. The reality and the imagined.
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, and similarly in Valley of Fear, of course, you have Pinkerton. And
Yes.
Pinkerton was a very real company.
It certainly was. Came to a lot of great use. So here's another interesting pairing in Valley of Fear. Canadian Pacific Railway,
Right.
very real railway company. But then you've got the State and Merton County Railroad, which is a fictional one. Again, this lovely blend of real and fabricated company names. So Conan Doyle only has to do half as much work writing these stories.
One of my continuing favorite firms in the
Yes.
cases of Sherlock Holmes is Castellotti and Zamba.
I
When we
love
talked
that
about
one.
when we talked about partnerships, we talked about that. But
Yes.
that's from the Red Circle. They're the fruit importers.
They're not the dance company? Zumba. Sorry. Castellotti.
Castellotti and Zamba. Well, no, they did get first place in ballroom dancing.
Yeah. Dancing with the Canonical Stars.
Yes.
That'll be a
Yeah,
good show.
it was Elaine Zamba. You know, she used to wear these sparkly long gowns. You know.
Look at old Elaine.
Yeah.
Now, what if I were to give you the names of Schumann and Van Der and Manson?
Well, those sound very ironic to me.
Yeah. They sound like composers, really.
Oh, Schumann, yeah. Well, there's an easy one, but not Manson.
Not in this context. Not Manson and Van Der.
Ironworks.
Yes. Makes you wonder if they worked overseas with the Harrison family from 2 episodes ago. They were, he was an iron master. So that's a good one.
Yeah.
What else? What else do we have in mind when it comes to North American companies?
Well, none of the rest of them really, they're just sort of general names. I mean, it's interesting when you think about businesses, obviously the legal profession, lawyers, barristers pop up occasionally. And in North America, you've got John Hebron, who pops up in the yellow face. And Riley, the single name Riley, mentioned as a lawyer in Valley of Fear.
Yeah, John Hebron. That was the first husband of, was it Lucy Hebron? Was that
Maybe.
Grant Monroe? Was that from the Yellow Face, right?
Yep.
Yeah. He was Grant Monroe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think his daughter was, or his wife was Lucy. So yeah, we don't hear much about him other than knowing that he was in fact a lawyer, and that relationship and interracial marriage at that time was very scandalous, and even though he had a respectable profession, still might have been kind of outcast in society. And maybe it wasn't the marriage combination. Maybe he was an outcast simply because he was a lawyer. Ambulance chaser. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, I think that kind of wraps up. Here's an interesting category. One final category to round things out here. Of course, we mentioned in the previous businesses episode about Ivy and Plant being a public house. And there are so many different public houses mentioned in the canon. I gotta say, we must have done an episode a while back on public houses. Must have been like season 1 or season 2. We did a series on alcohol, I think.
Oh, sure.
I'll put the link to that in the show notes if I can come up with it. So many wonderful public houses, like the Dangling Prussian. Right? When you come over to North America, we don't have public houses over here. We have saloons.
Well, we used to have saloons, yeah.
Well, we did, yeah, with the swinging doors and all the rest.
Yeah.
You think of any saloons in the canon?
Oh, sure. Well, in Valley of Fear, there's Lake Saloon, which is always a good. Oh, I always enjoy in the spring going over to Lake Saloon and taking out a rowboat, and because it's the entire lake is, I think, 4% alcohol. And,
that's way better than the Dead Sea.
Yes, absolutely.
The Dead Sea is where you go to rim your tequila, your margarita glass. Yeah. Here's an interesting one. The Joint.
The Joint. Boy, oh boy, this is sort of like from the same people that brought you Moe's and The Simpsons. People. I don't know. What do you think we should call the place? I don't know. It's just a joint. Oh, all right. A name that took probably 5 seconds to figure out.
Exactly. Well, it was the place that oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name now. Elsie Cubitt.
Yes.
Elsie Patrick. Yes. It was old Patrick who ran the Joint.
The Joint.
Yeah.
In Chicago.
And who might you see if you went straight to the Union House? Who would you be looking for at the Union House?
The Union House? Well, President Lincoln, I would think.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
John McMurdo singing, Bertie Edwards?
Well, you're in the right neighborhood. You'd be looking for Boss McGinty.
Oh,
at the Union
Boss
House.
McGinty.
Yeah. That's the Union House.
That was his enterprise, was
Yeah.
it?
One saloon which rose almost to the dignity of being a hotel. Almost.
I wonder what happened if you got a job at the Union House. Did you actually have to adopt the name Employee McGinty?
Brother. which worked. Well, yeah, I'm part of the local Union House workers. Well, fantastic businesses from North America, which are all worth mentioning, and they are all quite more than a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
Watson, you have a blazing talent for observing the obvious.